Okay, dear colleagues, welcome to the Fishbowl. I hope you like fishing. I've never done it myself, or actually I did, but it was a long time ago when I was something like 5 years old. Anyway, we will do the fishing today, and if you have never done it before, I hope you will enjoy it, and I hope that the fact that we are so near to the deep waters of the Baltic Sea will somehow inspire us to this discussion. So the aim of all workshops today is actually to capture experiences and also demands for territorial evidence towards the ESPON program. And more specifically in this workshop, we will focus on the experiences of using ESPON results by EU presidencies and what is even more important on the new ideas and proposals for using the work of ESPON to support and to promote the intergovernmental cooperation at the EU level on the territorial development issues. So you're very welcome to this workshop, and before we start, I will explain to you shortly the organization of our workshop today. So first of all, we will have two introductory presentations by me. Again, you will have to listen to more of me. And by my colleague Frederick from Luxembourg, the upcoming presidency. So we are actually the largest part of the trio. We're just missing Italians. But as the commissioner actually yesterday said during the cities forum, actually the trio is Latvia, Luxembourg, Netherlands. So we have changed the organization of trios somehow on the road. Anyway, so after the two introductory presentations, we will jump immediately into the fishbowl. What does it mean? So there's an inner circle of chairs, as you can see, with the mics. The methodology is that we have two introductory speakers. We have Sverker and we have David. And they will start the discussion according to the questions. And any one of you who is willing to join the discussion have to jump into the fishbowl. Okay? So there are 3 empty chairs. And at any point you feel that you would like to say something, react to someone's remarks, to ask questions, or to share your experience, you're welcome to jump in and to do so. Okay? So the way you participate in the discussion is that you move around the room. Okay? And once you have done speaking and you think that you will say no more, or you might say something later, you can leave the chair, you can take any other chair you like. So I hope this will allow us and promote a very interactive discussion among us today on, I think, a very important topic of how to make the most of the ESPON work and how to use ESPON in policy making at EU level, and also how to use ESPON work to promote our intergovernmental cooperation at EU level. So let's immediately start with the two introductory presentations, and that, as I said, will be me again. What I would like to share with you today is the use of ESPON results by Latvian Presidency. So how did we benefit from the ESPON projects and the results of the ESPON projects in our work during the presidency. And as you know, we still have something like 3 weeks to go, and then we're done. Yippee! Okay. When we started the discussion with our trio, within our trio, with our Italian colleagues and Luxembourgish colleagues, we had a number of topics that we have identified as the framework of our trio presidency program. And here you can see the short summary of what we identified as our activities, the main actions, and also the objectives within our trio presidency program. And that action 5 is mostly oriented on the urban dimension of territorial development. And we have decided to focus our attention on urban development issues, specifically in relation to the development of small and medium-sized urban areas, considering that Latvia is small, Luxembourg is even smaller. We thought it could be relevant for us. Considering that the discussion on an EU urban agenda was already running for a number of years, and we realized that we have to contribute to this discussion in terms of content, in terms of our understanding on what urban agenda should cover, what are the issues, what are the topics, and what are the aspects. We thought that our contribution could be related to a more in-depth study and understanding on the role of small and medium-sized urban areas in Europe. So this is the topic that we chose. And the reasoning was related also to the fact that we thought that small and medium-sized urban areas are a little underrepresented in both policy and research. And any time that we speak in Europe about urban things, we tend to think in our minds and also in our discussions to focus more on the challenges and development potentials of capital cities or second-tier cities, and also on metropolitan areas. And somehow the topic of small, medium-sized urban areas was missing. And also it is still missing in a number of EU-level strategies. However, we thought it's important because at least 1/4 of all EU inhabitants live in small and medium-sized urban areas, and actually small and medium-sized urban areas are the prevailing type of settlement in EU, and we have more than 8,000 of those areas beyond, sorry, not beyond, below, with a number of inhabitants below 50,000 that we call small and medium-sized urban areas, and we have more than 8,000 of those. And we were actually very lucky that when we chose the topic, we realized that we already have a piece of research done within ESPON, and that was the town project. So we took that as one of the main sources, and we decided that we should not attempt at creating any new knowledge, but rather use what we already have on the table, and that was the town project. And we decided that we should, as a presidency, with the support of our Vidzeme University of Applied Sciences, and also with the support of EUKN, to draft a synthesis report. And the synthesis report would use as the main source this town project, and also collect some good practice examples, and also analyze some statistics, and also some more information on the support instruments for urban development. So the research report that we, with the support of our researchers, the synthesis report that was elaborated, that was developed, it contains key findings on characteristics and challenges of small and medium-sized urban areas. It also characterizes the significance of small and medium-sized urban areas, development directions, strategies, and also, of course, recommendations for further work with this topic. So the research approach included analysis of statistical data. As I said, we used town project as the main source, case studies, also assessment of EU and other foreign financial instruments. Our focus was to see in more detail what are the trends and challenges, what could be and what is already the contribution of these areas to economic development and growth, and also what are the successful strategies. And in order to characterize those, we chose 10 case studies in Latvia, and also case studies of other member states, and they are also a part of this report. Now, what did we do with this report? The key messages of this report were synthesized even further into what we now call Riga Declaration. This is the declaration that I was mentioning in the introduction of today's seminar. And this declaration has, so to say, two main pillars, or two main blocks. First one is the set of principles and set of elements that should be used by the next presidencies, and more specifically also by the Dutch presidency, in order to establish the EU urban agenda, because there will be an agreement next week, we hope so, that we will have an EU urban agenda established by mid-2016. And the other block that is included in this Riga Declaration more specifically covers the topic of small and medium-sized urban areas. In terms of content, the main elements of in terms of content, this Riga Declaration identifies a number of elements of the EU urban agenda. So we have defined and agreed with the governments of around Europe that it should respect urban diversity and unlock the potential of different urban areas. It should focus on the opportunities of urban areas besides addressing only the challenges. It should also provide framework and instruments to improve the urban dimension in EU policy making. And here we talk about place-sensitive, tailor-made EU funds. We talk about territorial impact assessment. And of course, this agenda should also be oriented towards promoting cooperation among urban areas of all sizes and knowledge base. And more specifically on the role of small and medium-sized urban areas, the main messages that we took from the synthesis report into the declaration are related to the acknowledgement that these areas fulfill very important economic and social functions. They are essential to avoid rural depopulation and urban drift. They also are very important players because they contribute to development of metropolitan areas being connected in a polycentric network. And of course, they also have significant existing and potential collective contribution. Collective is the main word here, collective contribution to EU strategic goals. By that I mean that they are not allowed to act alone. And even more so, we have in this declaration included some messages that are related to acknowledging the common challenges and significant development potentials of small and medium-sized urban areas. We have numbered, I think, if not all of them, then probably most of them. And we think that it's very important that they are taken into account in policy making, both at EU, national, and lower levels of governance. And we have already, and we have also identified a number of, so to say, directions of action or actions that are especially important for development of these small, medium-sized urban areas. And what is very important for them is to foster diversification of economic activities, to find solutions for provision of qualitative, accessible and cost-efficient public services, considering that these areas also are challenged by quite substantial and continuous depopulation. What is very important to understand is that actually this topic is half urban and half territorial, because you know, there are people who even say those are not urban areas. Those are rather rural areas. But in any case, those are certain nodes of service provisions and of jobs, and it's very that allow us to link the topic of urban with the topic of territorial, and therefore it was very important for us to study it in more detail. And of course, strong capacities, integrated and place-based support measures are very important factors of further development of these areas. So to synthesize all of that, how did we apply the ESPON evidence, ESPON knowledge? We took a piece of research, we synthesized the main messages into what we now call Riga Declaration, and Riga Declaration will be the next, so to say, a very important document and the next step that will then feed into the discussion on the content of the urban agenda, and the content of the next EU policies and also national policies. So through Riga Declaration, we have proposed to bring the knowledge created by ESPON to and transfer this knowledge into further policy making process. And therefore, I think that every presidency that wants to put a topic on the agenda of the intergovernmental cooperation can benefit from the evidence created by ESPON. and use this opportunity to bring topics that are important to the governments in the EU and add significance to these topics. And also this helps to, so to say, to bring issues to the forefront of EU policy making and to the national policy making, because the presidency, of course, is the role that allows you to, put to the forefront some very important issues. And this is what we did, and we hope that Riga Declaration will really allow these messages from the ESPON Town project to become an integral part of EU policy making. This is all from me at this point, and now I would like to give the floor to Frederick to continue with our introductions.
Hello, my name is Frederick. I'm a colleague of Timo at the Luxembourg Ministry of Sustainable Development and Infrastructure, and today I'm going to talk about the ESPON project ET 2050 and how we have used it so far to develop what we call our Action 2. So once again, as Ilona said, we have this trio presidency program, and I'm going to focus on action number 2, which is the territorial scenarios and visions of Europe for 2050. So what are sort of the actions that we wanted to do during the Luxembourgish presidency? Well, we placed it under the general theme of making sort of the territorial cohesion objective and the territorial agenda 2020 more operational. We wanted to do that by critically assessing sort of the material and the approaches that we find, and among them obviously being the ESPON project. But we also want to create the common political understanding that is necessary to start this debate of a very policy-oriented scenario and visioning process, at the end of which there is, if we go ahead with this process, there's really something that politicians can show and that will have a lasting impact. We place a great value on discussing these modalities of the process with various stakeholders, and obviously we want to reach out beyond the circle of usual suspects. We want to go beyond sort of the intergovernmental dimension and really involve the academic circle and the ESPON community. But in the end, what we need to find is political support at the ministerial level. There is a long way to this political debate. And the question that we ask ourselves, why do we need this, is the question what comes after the territorial agenda, but also the necessity of creating a common reference for policymaking in the future. We don't want to go on with ad hoc policymaking. We want territorially integrated policies, and we want to avoid that in the future. Everything is still sectorially driven as it is at the moment. As our Director General used to say, we want to avoid bridges going to nowhere. The question is, are we ready for a European debate? Because obviously spatial planning is a national competence, even though territorial cohesion is in the treaty, and it's a competence that is jealously guarded by member states. So we have to ask ourselves these questions, and we think that this is our burden of proof during the presidency. Now, we looked at the ESPON project ET 2050 quite in detail, because we think it is very, very rich in what it is doing. And the first thing that we were looking at is sort of the territorial vision that consists of these two concepts of openness and polycentricity that sort of everything else in the vision is based on. From these two policy aims of openness and polycentricity, you sort of deduct 5 different policy aims that try to give a more practical dimension to these overarching concepts, with which politicians probably cannot do that much. But with this, you already have sort of an idea as a politician where the vision is going. What we have here is the Free Horizons model on which some of this is based. And already here we see that this might be something that is very hard to understand, even sort of for us sometimes, sort of where you are going, where you are coming from, and how in the end you get to this vision. This is sort of the maps that this is based upon, and we think that this, for example, is already a better representation of where we are going. This is something that we can show politicians, where we can say, this is where we start in 2020, this is where we want to end in 2050, and sort of the spreading out organically of the vision. The question is, so what? Here we have a vision and we have instructions on how to implement it. But what are we going to do with this? The questions that we ask ourselves, is this the best use of the European territory? is this actually our decision to take? Are we actually in a position as sort of officials and functionary to tell European citizens and politicians this is something that you should aspire to? And how can we promote the discussion if we provide the answers, one, that we want to see, because when we propose them a vision, this is what we want to see in the sense, and the answers before anyone else has a chance to say something. Because if we say that we want a discussion on where the European territory is going, but in the end we just give them a vision, what are we actually doing? Are we actually having a discussion? Questions that politicians ask themselves is, what is the added value of having a territorial vision? What does it cost in terms of time, resources, and political capital? What kind of vision do I want? Is this actually the right way? How do I sell it to the voters? A very important question, obviously. And what are the alternatives? And this was really where we thought this is a turning point where we cannot just look at the vision in the project, but where we have to go on. And the solutions that we found is policymaking is about choices and opportunity costs. So why don't we use scenarios to explain and illustrate the impacts of various policies and let politicians decide out of these scenarios and different alternatives where they want to end up in the future. The scenarios are linked to the vision in a very complex way that I'm not going to talk about. And there are different kinds of scenarios that they present. We have the baseline scenario where it's basically business as usual, which I think is very easy to explain to people. You say, what we have at the moment, it just goes on. You don't change anything, you go on with it in the future. And then we have three different scenarios. We have a market-based growth scenario that favors really large metropolis. Then we have the promotion of secondary city networks. It's more polycentric vision, where, well, you're going to see it on a map in a minute. And thirdly, you have more of a regional distribution where you look at some of the regions lagging behind, which looks like this. This is the metropolis. This is the one about the second-tier cities. You can already see that it's spreading out a bit. And this is scenario C of the regions lagging behind. And I think you can show politicians the individual maps, but you can also show them how it evolves and how there's a difference of what sort of the impact of their choices can be, of which kind of regions, cities, types of cities they're favoring. Now, there's obviously also about results and impacts on these scenarios. And we see that towards 2030 already, scenario B, which is the one about second-tier cities, is the most expansionary in terms of GDP. You can also see that it leads to the highest levels of cohesion, but at the same time, competitiveness. This is a very interesting sort of result that we get out of this. But we also have some problems sort of in communicating some of the messages from the scenarios, because obviously it's a very complex process, and it has all these exogenous conditions and policies that we would have to explain to politicians. The project managers sort of went on and disaggregated the scenarios into scenario variants that look at extreme conditions, extreme socioeconomic, technological, and environmental conditions. What we end up with is this. This is GDP per capita, where you see on the top left side, you see the baseline scenario that if we go on with business as usual, this is sort of what it's going to look in 2030 or 2050. But then you also have, for the different scenarios, you have what the impact of the policy choices that you make are in relation to the baseline scenario. So that's why the colors are different, because the three other maps are always in relation to the baseline scenario. And I think this really shows very well what the difference of the choices that politicians can make really is in a very graphic and easy to understand way. This is very interesting, for example. This is looking at the extreme varieties of the scenarios, but again, it's a bit difficult to understand, and there would have been some polishing to do in trying to explain to politicians how this would work out. Again, here you have the results for the main indicators. Again, this is sort of, it's very interesting to see that scenario B, in this case scenario B2, sort of has the best results, the best indicators, but it's very difficult to understand. So the conclusion that we reach is, in the end, what counts for politicians? Well, we think that it's important for politicians to see and to be able to explain the added value of having a territorial vision. We think it's important to see the vision emerging as the best option for them out of alternative futures, so that they actually have a choice. We think that it's important to be able to make a political choice, to make a choice that is informed and based on evidence, so that when they step in front of the voter and have to defend this vision in some way, that they basically know why they have chosen this, and in the end to understand what it takes to implement a vision. We think that this ESPON project offers important access points to these issues, but it may not work as a ready-to-implement vision. That's why we think it might be necessary to deconstruct and then maybe reconstruct the rich material that we find in this project and adapt it to the needs that we as the presidency see. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Frederick. So I think now is the time that we jump into the fishbowl thing and start fishing for your experiences and your ideas. Now let me show the questions for the debate. Where's my presentation now? Help. Okay, here it is. Okay, here's the golden fish we have to catch now. And the questions for the debate are: how has ESPON evidence supported the intergovernmental debate during your presidency, or maybe you have been a part of the discussions organized by other presidencies where you have seen that ESPON evidence is used, and what are the lessons learned from that experience? Are there any plans that you're aware of to use ESPON evidence during the intergovernmental discussions during presidencies? What do you think are, in more general terms, main advantages of ESPON in supporting the intergovernmental debate on territorial development issues, and what are the advantages of ESPON that it provides us to actually bring forward the issues on the political arena? And how should ESPON maybe adapt somehow its tools, its procedures, or its content or topics that are being studied in order to serve better the intergovernmental cooperation at EU level? And we have two speakers who have kindly agreed to start the debate. And I think I would like to start by asking these questions to Sverker. You're my long-standing colleague in the intergovernmental cooperation. I guess both of us have been there for more than 10 years now. So we have quite a substantive experience in these debates. So Sverker, tell us what are your experiences and observations, and maybe your advice in how to make ESPON more used by the governments, by the presidencies, by the intergovernmental cooperation that we are in for a number of years now.
Thank you for the introduction. Yes, my name is Sverker Lindblad, coming from the Ministry of Enterprise and Innovation in Sweden, Regional Growth Division. I'm also a member of the Monitoring Committee of ESPON, and I've followed the ESPON work for quite a long time now. As a starting point, I would like to look a little about the headline for this workshop, because when we are talking about uptake by presidencies, I think it might be a little too narrow, because if it's of interest for the presidency, it should also be of interest for all the member states and the whole EU community. Otherwise, the priority from the presidency could be a little too limited. So I likely would like to widening the perspective that it should also be of use for the whole EU community. When it comes to the two examples we have heard about here today, the small and medium-sized urban areas and the territorial visions and scenarios, I think they are quite, the differs from each other quite a lot. Taking the first example, I would say it could be 3 dimensions on that are possible for ESPON to investigate and to analyze and to make up some conclusions from. First of all, I think it have to do with definitions and methodology. Small and medium-sized urban areas. What is it? How do we delimit such areas? How small urban areas do we talk about, and how big are medium-sized? That's the first definition and methodological issue that ESPON could do something about. The second one, we talk about urban areas. We have already heard about that we should look at functional urban areas. And what is that? We speak about functional urban areas as commuting areas. And having a common system for looking at functional urban areas in the European concept, I think that's important and something that ESPON should try to further investigate to see how we could deal with that kind of information and knowledge around functional urban areas. I know it's a complicated issue because of statistics and data on that level, but we need to go further on that because from a territorial perspective it's important. Second dimension is about the challenges and territorial potentials. It's both the problems in that kind of regions and secondly also possible futures, the territorial potentials on such regions. And I think Ilona have already touched upon a lot of this. It's about demographic development. It's about service of general interest. It's about regional attractiveness of such regions. How could we foster a good development out from these perspectives? So that's about priorities, how to find the right priorities in such regions. For strategies in this kind of regions to be successful. And third dimension, I would say it's more how to do it in a good way. It's about governance, it's about planning, spatial planning issues, or the combination between spatial planning and economic development. That's also something that ESPON could deal with, to look upon effective ways for governance and spatial planning. Is there a need for regional reforms, for instance, to look at functional urban areas instead of just small municipalities in such areas? Or is it more need for cooperation between such towns and municipalities? So that was the first theme and topic. The second one, territorial ambitions for 2050. I would say it's a totally different story. It's more complicated because of the long time horizon, the broad perspective, and somewhat speculative nature of the topic. It could be hard to get an involvement from stakeholders and practitioners, decision makers, and so on, when it's so far ahead, 2050, that then if they should discuss it today, they will probably be retired when this vision should be in practice. So it could be quite hard to get any involvement, and it's also hard to see if it's possible to change something when it's so broad perspectives that we are looking at. How could a decision maker today find the right ways ahead to go into such a future that are likely to be or that they want to be? So the main use of such a project within ESPON, I would say it's very much as a tool for dialogue. And I think that was exactly what Frederick also said. It's about dialogue and foster a debate. And how then do we, in the best way, foster a debate on territorial issues? And I would maybe say that the vision until 2050, it's not the most important part here. It's the debate on territorial issues that are the most important part, to look at territorial issues in the European context. And I think that the best way is to use maps. Maps is something that everyone could relate to and have a dialogue around. And here, really, ESPON come to having the best experiences and can use maps as a tool for dialogue. So I would say that this is a way for ESPON to foster the dialogue, to use maps and trying to, in a systematic way, also find forums and different kinds of meetings and conferences where we could use maps in a more systematic way. Then it could be a good way to foster a dialogue around the future of territorial Europe. So that's my introductory word. I might come back also to how, from a Swedish perspective, how we used used ESPON during our presidency. But I can come back to that later. Yeah.
Thank you, Sverker. Before I give the floor to David, I would like to encourage you to start moving around, which means that any one of you who is ready to speak up next is invited to take the chair in the fishbowl. Otherwise, my both introductory colleagues will start feeling a little lonely. So please, while David is speaking, anyone else who would like to be next as a speaker or reflect to any messages that you've heard or share your experience, please come up and join the fishbowl. Now, David, I'd like to ask you to share your experiences or your views of how ESPON could support intergovernmental debate or support any kind of debate of policy making at EU level or national level.
Okay, thank you. For those who don't know me, I'm David Evers from the Netherlands Environmental Assessment Agency, and we are a research institute, so we do research for the ministry, so I'm not actually involved in politics in that sense. I'm a researcher like many people here at ESPON. But we do research for government, and so what we do is very policy-oriented as well, so I think that's the reason why I've been asked to say a few words here. And I was asked to reflect on the presidency and what ESPON can mean for the presidency. And I first started off thinking, well, what is this presidency? It really is an interesting and fascinating aspect of the European Union. Every 6 months, you have a new president, and the spotlight is on that nation, and they get to share their perspectives. People get to know that presidency better. There's a lot of interaction, and it's a way to engender dialogue between the member states, and I think that's quite interesting and unique. It's been going on since 1958, so people are probably quite used to it, but other parts of the world don't have this. So I think this is a very nice strength of the European Union, and also it ties in a bit to ESPON as well, because we also travel from place to place, and we talk about territories, and we talk about the different challenges in these territories. So I do see a kind of a natural link in this idea of highlighting topics and having a dialogue about that. Presidencies, of course, have their own agendas. They want to highlight certain topics which are important to them, and yet, if you do it too much, it's not seen as very politically correct. You don't want to push too hard. So when you frame your own issues, the things that you find important, you usually try to find other people who are facing similar issues, or you try to frame it in general terms of European well-being. And I think is also quite an interesting way to push the dialogue forward, and I think it has some links, again, with ESPON, where sometimes even if we do look at a case study, we are also interested in the greater European picture. So I see some interesting parallels, at least in the years that I've been involved in ESPON. I've been involved in ESPON almost 10 years now, which is quite a long time, so I'm a veteran of the ESPON family. And I've seen some presidencies come and go. I've seen topics such as economic development, immigration, borders, that kind of thing. And all of those things are sometimes more important to certain nations, but they're usually generalized as well. So to then go a bit to the Netherlands, which is, I guess, the third country of this troika, which is happening now. And I can't really say so much about what our plans are, which ESPON results we've already used, because it's a bit in the future. But I think it's kind of interesting that the approaches that, at least what we're thinking about, is a little bit different than the two that I just seen from Latvia and Luxembourg. This morning you saw the proposal from our Ministry of Internal Affairs about the urban agenda, and this is a big dialogue, and he sees that as a way of getting stakeholders together and talking about urban issues, and that they will find each other in topics, in themes. And then I think, well, then it's a very bottom-up process. At that point, then, you need to say which ESPON reports are most relevant. And it won't be just one ESPON report. It'll be, for a particular topic, it could be 3 ESPON reports, and you might have various themes. And I think that's great. One issue that I want to raise here within our Fishbowl, and there's probably people from ESPON as well who have to think about this as well. Once you have this commitment of these stakeholders, they say, okay, Amsterdam Declaration, we're going to sign it, we're going to really start work on this theme, we want some results. Is it sufficient to have them submit an expression of interest and wait a year or 1.5 years before the results come? If there isn't a report that was just already published. So that's one thing that I want to first address, because we know already in advance that it's coming. We know that there's going to be a question of it, but we don't know exactly what the topics are. And if those topics are topics that we don't have a good report on right away, how can we move a bit faster? And I think I'm going to leave it at that.
Thanks a lot. We have another participant in the Fishbowl. Welcome. If you could please introduce yourself and shoot.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I'm Adam Radvansky. I have some experiences. I used to live in Hungary, and I was working for the Hungarian presidency, preparing the territorial agenda. And maybe I can say my first impressions at that time when we started preparing, that was 2009, I was really disappointed, because we were waiting for ESPON to serve or to support our work, and the new program didn't have any results yet, and we were in a quite strange situation with the crisis. We could not really use the old results, and we were there. We were begging for support by ESPON, but we were quite disappointed. And what we did, we had a working group or a drafting team of experts delegated by member states, a smaller group, and we had to fish actually all the information about territorial development, also in times of the crisis. That means we didn't have the right, we didn't have available ESPON results to reflect on the situation, and the political demand was, of course, to react on the situation that is there, and not an old one. So there we were a bit disappointed, but we had a great team, and we whatever ESPON results we could use, we used it, and we got also some information from ESPON. I think if we had to revise the TA now, we were in a luckier situation. Now we have a lot of results. We could have more in-depth information, and I think the program developed a lot in this respect, and the plans for the future of more in-house capacities and having this possibility to react more quickly is quite promising. So this is one my experience with ESPON. We used other results which may be more difficult in that part, so has some disadvantages. but also it had some advantages that we used not only ESPON results, but we also used other researches, which are maybe not in geography, but more in economics. It was the economic crisis, more results. So we opened up our minds. We had to open up our minds because there were no ESPON results. So we used other sources as well. And we had a lot of discussions, even if there were not enough data. I would like to reflect also to your suggestion about maps and that we need more maps to have discussion. I would like to remind you that we tried in the TA 2020 to put some more geography in that, to have more specific geographical goals, objectives. It didn't work out. We had we had a lot of discussion, that's for sure. But as we were running out of time, we had to find a compromise, and our proposal was not taken up by the member states. It was quite difficult. We tried it, but it was not taken up by the member states, so we had to withdraw these proposals of having more geography and more territorial substance in the proposal. So maybe ESPON could help the future presidencies in the legitimation, because we were an expert group of some member states. We had a proposal which was not taken up by other member states. Maybe if we have the ESPON program behind with all the information that is there, maybe we could defend that more than just having a small expert group proposing some territorial issues. And maybe this could be one value added, and this is something that also reflecting to the discussion before, I think it's very important that ESPON should clearly know what is the added value. If it's really the role of ESPON to serve like Interact programs in monitoring or ERDF programs. That's the other workshop, but that was mentioned this morning. If we could help in developing indicators and monitoring systems, I'm not sure if that is the value added if we use our resources, limited resources in the ESPON program to do so. Also, if there is a regional reform in a country you mentioned, I don't know if this is something that we have to have ESPON results on. If it's not a national issue and we just keep it on national level, if it's not really, I think there is enough Euroscepticism in Europe. Then if we want to address everything on European level, it may say, oh no, Europe shouldn't tell us how we reform our regions. So I think there the subsidiarity would be important. But in general, the value added. So I think the value added of ESPON is the synthesis, not just updating indicators and but thinking about territorial structures. What are the functional regions, cross-border functional regions, or transnational functional regions? So ESPON in the future should really concentrate, I think, on those issues that where we have an added value with our limited resources, and what is not really an added value, we should leave it to the other programs. They have a lot more money to finance their own monitoring activities and so on.
Thanks a lot. I remember Hungarian presidency as actually one of the very successful presidencies, and in our discussion on TA 2020, I wish we could agree on more geography of the strategy, because this is something that we now try to discuss again and propose with this activity by the Luxembourgish presidency of discussing the scenarios and potential visions for Europe. And the main argument is that our current agreements do not have enough geography in them. We talk about urban development, urban-rural development, we talk about polycentric development, But what exactly is the Europe we are building here, spatially and territorially? We don't see it on the map, and this is something that, of course, all of us would like to see. At the same time, I understand your argument, and I remember our discussion. It is a sensitive issue, so our Luxembourgish colleagues are in a very insecure and a very unsafe, I would say, area, but we'll try to do our best to help them in this endeavor. Alexandros?
Yes, that's one more. Presidency which is already done, but what I want to say, it is not so simple. You have to find your own timing for presidency preparation. I remember Netherlands was always very efficient in doing that. In 2004, they were chairing. Before that, I guess maybe it comes from Christian habits. Before the Christmas time, so that a priest visits his parish. And this happened with Netherlands' upcoming presidency at that time. They went around all member states, including future member states because of this 2004 wave, and discussed what could be possible to adapt. They had a lot of seminar work for discussion of that even before the presidency. And this particular presidency, upcoming one, started even earlier because 2016 is the presidency, and they started in 2013 with the Lithuanian presidency discussing on the need of urban agenda and adopting it in Directors General meeting during our presidency. And that is really important because we can see how long does it take to make political decisions. Latvia finally ventured to make a ministerial meeting, and this is a huge task and burden, and hail to Latvia making this huge effort. But then, of course, you have 3 crowns in your flag. So I think this is what Latvia is used to do and achieve. Anyway, the one thing is how to plan. That's your second question. It is long in advance. Because standard demand is at least half year in advance you are doing already your work, but you should plan in advance. The other point is to use ESPON. This also is related to plan in advance, because when we started this, of course we were happy enough that this ESPON 2007-2013 included also some research projects, several research projects on the topics we raised about territorial consequences, adverse territorial consequences of migration. On the development of territories, we also took it wider, not only urban, telling that territorial issues are important, and they have consequences not only inside urban territory, but also outside it, as urban networks are performing their tasks. So we can say that ESPON had several projects on this. So it is related not only to urban agenda, but also territorial agenda. But at the same time, it is, we can say it was not so easy to ask for something new. We were lucky, I must say, there was. But if we would ask for something new, no, ESPON 2013 program was not so versatile for responding immediately to the needs. Now we have this annual work program in advance, so we can plan at least, if we think presidency to be in 2 years or so, or 1 year, so then we can wait for 1 year research result. And besides, ESPON has also envisaged rush research, also very useful intervention in the new way. So these are important things. I hope that now ESPON will be more flexible and more appropriate to be used for the presidencies. And how to adapt the tools and procedure, I just say be far-sighted yourself, and then those procedures will help you. Otherwise, ESPON has been responding, as I said already, in this 2020 structure. So I hope for the better.
Thank you, Alexandros. Now Timo will tell us.
Yeah, thank you. Hello? Yeah, I'm now not sitting here as a managing authority, but as a policy maker, and I think I was now intrigued by first what Sverker was saying. I mean, what for? I mean, what for are we putting these maps on the table, for example? And the key catchwords I was noting down was a tool for dialogue and foster the debate. And I think we now also, being in the Luxembourgish presidency team, I'm trying to further develop the idea, and I think Frederick was very well describing the way how we actually try to go through that we really were going through a process when we try to understand what we can do with these scenarios. Maybe you can also, just as a background information, how we came actually to this idea. The context was, as Frederick said, that we actually see that as a possibility to further develop the territorial agenda, because it was on our trio actually to make a proposal whether the TA should be reviewed or not, and we come to the conclusion it's too early, but we need to have a tool to further, I mean, to pave the way for a revision. Now, and you very well explained the situation under Hungarian presidency. I was also one of the experts in this group who got a bit frustrated because there were no maps in the TA. Now, then I recognize that I'm getting a dinosaur, because I was also in the drafting group of the ESDP, of the European Spatial Development Perspective. And there we actually ended up with one map, which was only a physical one, and the rest we scrapped. I mean, in the TA we had no maps, but we got a background report, which actually was a kind of supporting document for the presidency. And now when Sverker said, okay, we should use it as a tool for dialogue, maybe we can find a way to upgrade it one step further. And I think this is exactly then the point where we can hook in. I mean, we have to get these maps out of the idea that they are prescriptive. That was always this sensitive point. I mean, that whatever map was on the table was that, oh, that doesn't look good for my country. Which is fair enough. I mean, on the other side, it's also really time now under the general political condition to really understand Europe as one territory. I mean, and to show the interdependencies. And I'm just contemplating whether the really the way out could be when we say, okay, we need to prepare a dialogue, a discussion document to show different maps, which show on the one side the European territory as once, but these alternative futures, or this or in a multi-dimensional way, the European territory. That this idea of we are prescribing something gets out of the head, and that it's really something for inspiration and to show that I mean territory matters, and to see that it's not only negative, but also positive, and it shows a variety of approaches. And I'm now thinking, okay, maybe we can also, with regards to now small and medium-sized medium cities, whether it would be useful if we have a presidency topic to think about how ESPON could provide a kind of discussion topic discussion document, which actually would help to start a debate, and in that way be useful for the policy process. I mean, these are just ideas now following this discussion, and I find it very inspiring now to go on with it.
Thanks a lot, Sverker, and then David again. And then we need 2 more people because we have 2 empty chairs, so please move around.
Okay, a couple of reflections. First on the Swedish EU presidency, a little more than 5 years ago now, and also reflections on what Adam Radwanski said. We had a little the same experience during the Swedish EU presidency like Hungary. The timing is very important when it comes to ESPON research and ESPON analysis. The ESPON program in that time was quite new. The Swedish priorities during the presidency was about territorial potential, especially in sparsely populated parts of Europe. And it was also about macro-regional strategies. And in fact, it was not easy to find so much ESPON results from these 2 perspectives in that time. We had some when it came to demography. That's true, and we used it from ESPON. But otherwise, it was easier for us to go directly to the Nordic Institute, Nordregio, which could react much faster on the need for analysis that we had from the Swedish presidency side. So that was an easier way. So what we heard here from Alexandra is that planning for the presidency long time in advance in what type of analysis and knowledge you want to have from ESPON, that's important. But I also have some hope for the new ESPON program to having more resources for this kind of ad hoc analysis to be fast and react on needs from presidencies and from EU commissions and so on. As I understood, it would be more resources within the new, not called coordinating unit anymore, it's EDGC organization that will have more resources to actually can react and do some jobs when it's needed for. So I have hopes for the new program when it comes to ESPON. And the second reflection is what also Adam Radwanski was into, the need for not being steering from European side what different member states should do, but he talked about regional reforms and so on, and that's true, of course. But what ESPON could do is trying to see how the situation is in different countries, pros and cons with different solutions. Is it good with the 36,000 municipalities in France? Is that a good solution for governance or having a good, effective governance? Or is it better with trying to find new forms of governance that reflects the functional urban areas and so on? That is kind of research and analysis that ESPON could really foster, and I think that's important. And I can, when it comes to what Timo said about maps, I very much agree what you are saying. I think maps, it's a powerful tool, and we will support very much from Swedish side if ESPON could go use maps much more for foster dialogues and debates on possible future, not steering what different countries and regions should do with maps, but just foster the dialogue to see possible futures for Europe. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. David, you have more comments?
Well, actually, I'd like to pick up on that last point, and because we were presented with possible futures in the scenarios and with a vision, and I think perhaps, first of all, 2050 I don't think is too far in the future. In the Netherlands we're working on a vision for 2050 as well, and I think other member states sometimes think quite a ways ahead as well. The thing is, when it comes from the descriptive to the prescriptive and from the possible impacts to this is what you should do, and I think we should really be careful about presenting these scenarios as this one is more desirable than the other, and maybe perhaps a bit more dialogue on the possible trade-offs of this. When I saw the presentation here, I see the one has the most GDP growth. Is that the one automatically that we're going to choose? Or are we really taking a standpoint here or not? So that's one thing that I think we should really present, is that we do the math and we come out to these trade-offs and we make these clear and we put them on the map, and then we can have a dialogue about this. And I think the presidency is a good way to foster this dialogue by presenting these, because you have a wide audience.
Thanks a lot. Who would like to continue? Timo?
Oh, I can just, before I run in danger to sit here alone, maybe, I just would like to also, now from the point of view of ESPON, just share an observation that to my understanding, there was a development with regards to being prepared to deliver on presidencies. I mean, on the one side, you can say, okay, there is a lot, if you have really new topics, of course, then you need to do something in advance. That's research takes its time, and even with the biggest team, you will never be able to do something new on scratch. But I think on the other side, the experience shows that there is a certain thickness of results there, where you can say, in principle, by this applied research project, there was already quite a broad themes, range of themes covered, and where you then can just go into the project or into the database, and then you can much easier now to extract something. And I think in that regard, it's certainly important and to think about updating basic indicators and things like that. But I just want to say that this is, of course, also something where we can build on, and which can be further developed in that regard.
Before you speak, dear colleagues, please use the 3 empty chairs. Otherwise, I'll start calling you individually. Okay? Inguna. Thank you. Anyone else, please? Experiences. You can even use this fishbowl to ask questions to anyone who already spoke. Why did you all leave, guys? Inguna is like alone? Oh, sorry. Inguna is completely lonely now. Okay, thank you. Thank you. You saved Inguna.
Okay. So, is it on? I think so, yeah. Okay. I just would like to add to the same thing Ilona explored before, how we get started to be prepared for the presidency. The first thing we have to do, we have to figure out what kind of research you can find through the Google, what kind of research is done before you put on a table your assumptions and considerations, and then we found out that if you have to frame the discussion, you have to find the common definitions, you have to find something which every member state can understand at the same level. For instance, when it's about the small, medium-sized towns, then it's about the classification. We have to know the subject we have to discuss. And that's why the best choice was the town project, because this was something which can serve as a basis for discussion. It's much more easier to initiate discussion based on the results we have got out from this project, because it is these results have been discussed before among the member states, and almost everyone like responsible civil servant within the country knows more or less what this classification is about. That's what, because I'm saying that's the important that these classification systems, this is a privilege of ESPON program, that we can figure out from there these classifications, and then we can how to build the common understanding about the issue. It helped us a lot. So that's what I like.
Thanks a lot. Neil, you wanted to add something, or?
Yeah, just a reflection on what people have said about this issue about maps and getting sort of using maps as a tool of dialogue. I mean, I think as a spatial planner, I obviously love maps, think that's a fantastic idea. It's a fantastic way of generating dialogue, but good luck to ESPON in trying to persuade certain member states that it's that maps are a good idea. I think sort of history has taught us from the times of the European spatial development perspective that maps, as soon as maps get involved, the power of either being on the map or not being on the map, that is, makes things highly contentious and highly sensitive. So, I mean, I'm sitting here sort of trying to rack my brains thinking about ways that sort of ESPON could persuade, certain member states about that, the value. And I agree, it is about this sort of trying to change that mindset from being prescriptive to using maps as a tool for inspiration, tool for dialogue, and so on. I mean, we're obviously in a very odd situation in the UK. We've always had a very sort of schizophrenic relationship with the European Union. But for me personally, as a planner and an English planner, I don't enjoy working in England on spatial planning issues for English public authorities, because I've been lucky through ESPON to be able to work for the Scottish government and the Welsh government, and I think they're just so much better than we are in England. I don't know whether David would agree with me, in thinking in spatial terms. And I know the value that the Scottish government certainly have placed on sort of ESPON research and how that's contributed to the publication of their national planning frameworks and so on. So yeah, it's just a reflection on. I wish we could have more of that sort of that sort of Scottish mentality of appreciating the value of spatial planning and so on in England. But I think it will be a very difficult task to get that to convince the member states, as I say, because of that sort of power of being on the map or not being on the map, being too sensitive. But without maps, I think the value of spatial planning is dramatically reduced. So I think we need to try and find a way to get maps back on the agenda.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. Without maps, we don't really see what is the Europe we're building. At the same time, I also agree that it's a tricky exercise, and it's actually a very political exercise, and therefore it is very difficult to push it through, to really have more geography to what we're talking about, because it adds very concrete things to what we really want to see in the end. Anyone else would like to join? I have also one more question I would like to maybe throw into the fishbowl. We are quite we are yeah, we have again someone very lonely. please join. Please join. Okay. You're allowed to sit
My
there,
friend.
even if you don't speak, yeah. But another question that I wanted to drop in is we have been talking quite a lot about the ability of ESPON to react to the demand for a specific territorial evidence. But can we say that ESPON can be and should be proactive, which means creating new knowledge and new evidence, and then somehow, I have no idea how, but somehow making member states being aware of that, and through that shaping the agenda and actually helping member states to choose the topics to be put on this agenda. So is it just about being able to react, or also about being proactive and impacting the way the political agenda is being created by member states, by the governments, by EU institutions?
We can go now, everyone's coming back. But I think my reflection was going to be, if Timo's a dinosaur, I'm a fossil. Because one of the things that struck me in the presentations is and timing becomes a key issue. And reflecting on the point that you've just made, those presidencies that have been using ESPON results have been, in a sense, lucky that there's been a portfolio of new evidence that's been built up, looking at new agendas that emerges over time. And when reflecting in terms of you had to respond to a crisis, but in a sense, it's only in the last year or so that the territorial evidence has come through in terms of, when did different regions go into the crisis, and when did they start to emerge from that crisis? So there is an issue of timing, and I think ESPON has been, in a sense, quite proactive in developing new territorial information, which you've then had the opportunity to use. Now, I guess the trick is going to be looking forward 3 or 4 years down the line and trying to then think, what are those agendas going to be that are going to be important and critical that ESPON needs to start working on today so that the evidence is there when it's needed. But I don't know how you respond to the unknown unknowns that will come forward, like the crisis that most people didn't anticipate and didn't expect. So I think whether presidencies are, we know where the next presidency is going to be 3, 4 years down the line, whether they are sufficiently thinking far enough ahead in terms of what they might be wanting to do and what evidence they might then want, I don't know. So I guess that's a reflection in terms of how should ESPON adapt and reflects back on the comments that you were making. I mean, I was involved in a couple of ESPON projects. One was Estador and one was North Sea Star, which was a targeted analysis. And my reflection about Estador was it actually had more impact because through no design of the ESPON project or the ESPON group, it didn't happen until 18 months after it was supposed to happen, which meant the results came out just at the time when everyone was developing their new structural programs, at which point it was in the right place at the right time so it could be used. Now, I don't know how you kind of sort that timing out. But in a sense, it was an accident, I think. And similarly with the targeted analysis with the North Sea Star, we went in as almost the kind of neutral brokers who could ask the questions that were political but weren't necessarily seen as being political. So I think there's different ways that ESPON can be used in smart. And I'm interested to find out more tomorrow about how the targeted analysis then falls through. But that, I think, will be quite interesting in terms of it's not going to have the broader European maps and broader European perspectives. I share my colleague's friend. We only ever draw maps about London. And we forget about the rest of the north.
Thanks a lot. I think on this topic of small and medium-sized urban areas, we were also quite lucky with this coincidence, because when we decided with my colleagues in Luxembourg that we will take this topic of small and medium-sized urban areas, I don't remember we were really aware of having this ESPON towns research, but when we realized we do, we were really happy because our own national research capacities are of course limited and much more limited than, for example, what you had in Hungary. And I think you were also quite praised during your presidency for the pieces of research that you did on demography and on climate change. That was also your own research institution that I don't remember the name anymore. Yeah, that provided this piece. And in our case, considering that our capacities are limited, we were really happy. And that somehow also happened by coincidence that we had this research finished by the time.
It raises an interesting question in terms of, and many of you involved in the monitoring committee and management, how do you then drive the agenda to deal with the issue? How do you deal with the issues that might be coming forward in 3 or 4 years' time? Or do we just rely on chance?
Yeah, I was going.
I just wanted to react first on your question if ESPON can be proactive or should be reactive or quickly reacting on demand. I think especially in presidency issues, ESPON should be proactive because in the other workshop downstairs in European policy issues, they are centralized. They have already European issues on the agenda, and presidencies define their programs based on their own position. What is in my country, it is very important. Small and medium-sized towns are very important, so we should put it in on a European agenda. But we think we put always these agendas based on our national interest. That's part of it because that's why it's intergovernmental. But this is where ESPON could also have an added value to identify European issues that maybe member states would not come up with. That those are the issues that are really not cross-border, but somehow going beyond borders, really European issues or issues for parts of Europe. So the topics could be coming more from the ESPON side, saying, yeah, we have the expertise here, we have a lot of researchers here, we investigated the European territory, and we found that actually functional regions are not the same as some member states would think about, and this is the evidence, and then the politics can take that up. But I think ESPON should be proactive in this way and not only like reacting. In my country this would be important. Let's make a research in ESPON on that or short analysis. Yeah.
I think we need to look at this in a more nuanced way, in a certain way, because, for example, I think that the territorial evidence that was called Evidence for European Urban Agenda came out in November last year, and I think it was in response to the consultation that was launched by the Commission in the summer. So I think in that sense, ESPON reacted quite quickly, put together a bit of evidence in terms of data, but also from a few other reports like the town report, like the green economy report. So I think it really depends on what certain presidencies need and what is currently on the agenda. Some presidencies need a bit more details, big projects like the ET 2050. Maybe in other cases, what we need is just a policy brief or a territorial evidence package that gives the basic the background to the topic and a bit of evidence, but maybe doesn't go into every detail. Also, I think we all know that sort of everything that is more than 50 pages sort of is difficult to communicate to certain people. Not everyone wants to read 150 pages of report, especially when it has very complex annexes, and so maybe ESPON really needs to diversify its offer and maybe focus more on data and policy briefs.
I think I fully agree with what Frederick's saying, because for us also to digest and to synthesize and to arrive at a 5-page declaration from, 200 pages of a piece of research is kind of difficult. So it is very important that ESPON provides a diversified set of deliveries that could be used by the presidencies and by any participating country in order to be able to put these topics on the agenda, and the instruments of the ESPON and the pieces of research that is provided is very important. Yeah.
No, but I would like to address two points. I mean, the first, we have maybe to think what can ESPON do and what can't it do, or what should it or what shouldn't. And this is a very sensitive border, because I think we need to always distinguish where does the evidence end and where does the policy start. And the point is, I think that's for me always the Lackmus test, or how you call it, whether ESPON shows developments or policy options, and then there is the choice to make. I mean, but the choice is the political one. This is where actually the competence or also the ESPON should see the limit, and that's actually then where it's also becoming interesting for the policy side, because then, I mean, politicians are there because they supposed to decide or be keen on take decisions. But then what David said, I mean, how can we manage to have the results which for the unforeseen, if you like, and certainly this is also something where we have maybe to be more brave to think square, or to follow up on wildcards, or to invest more in this in scenarios development, to understand what can be possible futures. I mean, when you look and sometimes it might be not even politically correct, and you may need to do it. I mean, now we see the whole challenge with the refugees in the Mediterranean. I mean, you can the question of the energy is, I mean, this was on the big agenda just before the crisis, and then via the crisis and all these new technologies about how do you call it, is when you get it, the gas out of the stones and fracking, yes. Suddenly this topic is off the agenda. But you can imagine that an oil platform is exploding, or a whole village is exploding because of fracking, and suddenly the issue is back again on the topic. So I think we have to prepare and think also the unthinkable in a way, and try to develop research projects in that field, then to be ready in case of things. And I mean, you mentioned the Estador, and often, even if it's not happening, you get a lot of new insights or new understanding on the base of having a different approach, or and thinking the whole territorial issues from a different angle. And I think there also for the monitoring committee, it's also important to be brave and test new subjects.
Thanks a lot. Welcome to the Fishbowl.
Thank you. I just may want to react what you have said, but first I have to admit something and say that until today I was sure that both of you, I mean, the Latvian and the Luxembourg Presidency, that you're extremely smart by choosing, I'd say, the topics that were so well done by the ESPON program, and today I have learned it is not exactly so, but anyhow, it's really a great coincidence. No, but you asked before how the ESPON could be, let's say, a bit more proactive, and I think that this ESPON scenario project it's really one of those. that I don't know what is going to happen with this vision during the Luxembourg presidency. How are we going to adopt it in a way, like on the European level or not? Probably not, because it's really a topic that is so politically, let's say, touchy that no one wants to go that. Although it's something that's extremely useful, it's something that is needed, and Europe as such needs a vision. But somehow even the ESPON Spirits project has somehow steered the this mud, or how to say it, and so many things came up, and the discussion on that was started. I think this is so important, that this is also the role of ESPON to make us, also as policymakers, to think about the future that maybe we don't do, or even if we do that on even a local, national level, we find it very hard how to get with these things, with these, let's say, even sometimes fears, or some these kinds of thoughts, to the policymakers, to the decision makers. So in this context, it's really important that ESPON made such an exercise, and in a way, it also gives a kind of I think so. It gives a kind of agenda for the ESPON, as now ESPON can monitor in a way, which scenario is underway. Okay, I know that the scenario is something that will never happen in the future, but still we can see in which direction do we go, and out of that it might come some, let's say, some then common topics even for the presidencies and so on, some ideas which we should deal about in the future, on what we should, let's say, focus our attention, where we should cooperate a bit more. This is really where I see this ESPON proactivity in the future.
Thanks a lot. Welcome to the Fishbowl.
Thank you. I would like to elaborate something on the political aspect of this, and I think perhaps the focus should be shifted from the intergovernmental debate to a more national debate, because, as you pointed out from England, there's a cleavage within countries that is hard to come to grips with, because it's more or less the same everywhere, that you have this shifting interest between capital regions and the periphery, more or less. And I don't think that any presidency can do very much to alter that, actually. Especially because most presidencies will be supported by their capitals and their governments. So I think what we should ask instead, if there is going to be a scenario that sort of lifts the small and medium urban regions to the forefront, I think we should look back some 25, 30 years and see what happened when in the era of Jacques Delors, when you had this alliance between the Commission and the regions to sort of alter the play and the rules of the game. And we have to ask whether the Commission will be strong enough to support such a shift, because ESPON in itself is not powerful enough to do much about this, but if there is a momentum that Brussels somehow could make new alliances with peripheries in Europe, that could change the game more or less. I mean, from my country, I come from Norway, and the reason why we are not member of the European Union is that the periphery was against, actually. And here is something that could be something for the periphery and for small and medium-sized urban regions. And then that could be a game changer, more or less, but that presupposes that the Commission is strong enough to be able to endorse such an initiative. And if we sort of find out that the Commission is not able to do that, well, then I think it's a possible dead end, actually, and we have to leave it to national debates.
Thanks a lot. I think you're bringing up a very important question on the role of the Commission, and in the Riga Declaration, also on the demand of the Commission, we have tried to define the future role of the European Commission in all these matters, also because they know that they are not strong enough at the moment. But they're also not strong enough to play this game with us, also because member states have been trying to, keep them away of these topics, right? We've been talking quite a lot about subsidiarity, proportionality, and in these topics mostly, the main message was keep your hands away. This is intergovernmental, okay? So with this Riga Declaration, this is one of the first attempts to define a more active role of the European Commission in all these matters. And the European Commission has asked us also to do so because they want to become in territorial issues, specifically DG Regio. They want to become more powerful in their relationship with other Commission services. And one example is, for example, the territorial impact assessment as a potential methodology and instrument, where the colleagues from DG Regio said that they were having bloody fights over a methodology on different evaluations that should be run, and then they had to fight very heavily to be able to agree within the Commission that there should be something like a territorial impact assessment developed. So they sort of need this mandate from the governments that the Commission somehow should play a role and have this role in promoting the development, a more balanced development of different areas. But this is usually a very sensitive issue, and of course the positions of member states on this matter are very polarized, still very polarized. Visvaldis.
Yes. I want to shift the debate from the macro level to the execution level and interaction between the policy makers and the researchers. That's my first contribution to the Fishbowl, because there's so many fishes in the Fishbowl, and so we'll have to start with small ones, I guess. Well, I think that I have been involved in two targeted analysis ESPON projects so far, and now I have been contracted to prepare the synthesis report for the small and medium-sized urban areas, and which I have been very lucky to carry out because of the cooperation that we had with the colleagues in the ministry, who were very prompt in actually reading and careful in reading the text and the communication back and forth in the process of actually making drafts of the report, and then also seeing the elements in the report present into the declaration itself. This is a process that has to be well arranged and well managed. So the micro level perspective and the capacity issue is definitely something to consider when we're talking about the interaction between the ESPON area researchers and the policy makers, how this interaction is actually carried out, who are the people who are interacting, and do they have the interest and motivation and capacity to actually make something out of it. It all comes to people, the social networks, and it also comes down to motivation to do these things. As I suppose a lot of things in this world, because it is a world of social networks, but not on only Facebook and Twitter, but it is actually the networks between the people. And since Europe is very small and the ESPON community is very tight, so you find these networks very important in day-to-day decision-making, and also carrying on with the research results and actually making the use of these research results. So to conclude, I think we are talking about very complex issue, like what is the agenda, how it is made up. And you're talking about three policy streams. You know, the politics is one politics stream, and then you have policy stream, and then you have the window opportunity. And it takes a great magician to put them all these three streams together, or it really takes a good fisherman to catch the big fish.
Thanks a lot. That's the realities of the policy and politics that we're dealing with. Anyone else? Frederick?
I just wanted to come back to the proactive role that ESPON should play. I think it's a two-way street. With the great opportunity that we have with the urban agenda, when, as the Dutch colleague Pedro said this morning, about sort of choosing the priorities for the next years, is also that we have sort of an agenda for the future, the topics that are going to be discussed, that are going to be on the agenda for a longer time. And I think this also allows ESPON to have an input from the member states what they expect in the future. And this is maybe something that should be replicated, that was supposed probably to be replicated with the territorial agenda or with the EU 2020 strategy, but that has not really come through, maybe because the goals of the EU 2020 strategy are too broad to really base projects on. But I think with the topics that we as a community envisage for the urban agenda, they're very concrete, they're very specific, and I think that in the future ESPON really has the input that it needs to decide its work programs for the coming years.
Thanks a lot. Any more reflections? David, you wanted to say something before. Maybe you can come back into the bowl.
It was about this particular point of you have the wheel of research, which can be slow, and you have a wheel of politics. It can also be quite slow because you're preparing decisions that will be taken over several years, and you might need luck at some point where both wheels just seem to be in sync. And the question is, how can you plan for serendipity? How can you increase your chances of getting this window of opportunity? And of course, one is to have a good basis of research. So whatever happens when this little window of opportunity opens, you can jump in very quickly. And even if there is a crisis or whatever, you understand the mechanisms, let's say, of the economy. So even though the data might not be up to date, you can at least say some intelligent things about what's happening and who will probably be affected more than others, and put that into a territorial perspective. So I see investing in just the base of knowledge is also important in order to be robust against these kind of chaotic unknowns. And the other is, of course, flexibility, that when something arises, when a window of opportunity arises, that you can jump in and you don't have, let's say, administrative procedures that entangle you in giving a response. And you see that in ESPON. There are different ways, like these briefs, et cetera. And I think this is improving every program in ESPON. And I think that's something very auspicious. So I hope that in the future there'll be more of these, let's say, moments where we thought, well, we're very lucky. Well, that's also because we set the right conditions for that luck.
Thanks a lot. You should always be prepared to be lucky, right? At some point. I agree with you. Okay, colleagues, 4 empty chairs. Please, your last chance to enjoy the fishbowl. It's a good feeling, believe me. Those of you who've been there know it now.
It feels like swimming around in circles.
Yeah. So, any last remarks before we try to sum up? Anyone? No? No? Last chance? No? Okay. I think we've done a great job. We're very precise in terms of timing. It's already 5:30. And I hope really that you enjoyed this discussion and the fishbowl method. I hope you will have a chance to experience it again. And now, before we finish today's agenda, I would like to probably try to sum up everything that we've heard. I will probably concentrate on the 2 main blocks of messages that you gave us. One on the added value of ESPON, and the other one on the timing, because most of you spoke about timing and how to actually put all the processes in a single stream and how to make sure that policy and politics goes together at some point. On the added value, well, clearly ESPON provides very good tools for dialogue and for fostering the debate, and clearly what we already all know, it allows to add more geography to our policy debate. And maps, of course, is a very powerful tool, and that is, I think, one of the main strengths of ESPON that we have to improve within the new program, and that we have to use even more. A very important added value of ESPON is related to the topics that could be further on explored, on territorial structures, on methodologies and definitions, on administrative reforms, on challenges, potentials, and possible futures of different areas. And here I think the number of topics is still extensive. a very important message is that disregarding the fact whether a certain topic will be taken up by the presidency or the government or I don't know, all governments of EU or not, ESPON should be proactive and should create this knowledge base that we can be sure will be used at some point sooner or later. So we should not probably wait just for the demand from the presidency or from some member state or from whatever. But we should work for creating a good basis of research needed. So ESPON should be proactive rather than just reactive. I very much like also the comment made by Frederick. For me, also as a policymaker, it's very important that the research that is being created is easily to apply and to use in the policymaking process. So it's very important that ESPON program provides us with diversified research products that are not only, very scientific, but also probably closer to making decisions, to actually understanding what are the policy options. I fully understand what Timo is saying, that actually it's a very thin line where does evidence ends and where does policy making begins. But for me, of course, as a policymaker, I'm interested in having the scientific or research projects that are as close to policy making as possible and as easy to transfer in policy documents as possible. So, of course, from our side, we would also encourage ESPON to become as friendly to policymakers as possible. And then again, I fully understand the message that was sent to us also by you, that it's not just about the presidency or just about the ESPON, it's about interaction between many players and also about the role and capacities of EU institutions to promote policy shifts and to actually balance different interests and to take on board the interests of different areas around Europe. Now, on the timing, as someone of you said, it's a two-way, stream or two-way road. Not only ESPON should become more able to respond faster to the demands for a new evidence by member states, but also member states and the governments should plan in advance. And moreover, those plans should somehow be publicly available, and ESPON should be able to know what could be the agenda in future years and at least 1.5 years ahead. And I think that the new setting that we have working in trio presidencies, I think provides a good basis to ensure that. For example, we had our program available already, I don't know when, half a year before actually beginning of last year. So actually it was already known what will be our priorities and the topics that we will cover, and then the only thing that needs to be done, we need to understand in what respect and on what topics ESPON can be sort of reactive and provide to us the necessary knowledge and the messages that we need. I also understand what Visvald is told us about the executive level of this interaction between researchers and policymakers. Of course, in the end, it's about the people who interact, the people who talk to each other, people who try to put those and bring those messages together and understand how it can feed into the European policy making. So in this respect, of course, it is very important that we have these opportunities to come and talk. And then from my side, of course, another message I think that is important, that I don't remember anyone said that, but but I mentioned it in my introductory speech today, in my welcome speech. We should really think of new methods and new tools to disseminate this knowledge and this evidence that is created among wider public. And in this respect, of course, we should think how to maybe improve the operation of the contact points and of the instruments and tools that they use in order to spread the news on the results of ESPON. I'm sorry if I didn't mention some of your messages, but I think it was like the mainstream that I heard. Maybe someone would like to add something that was very important that I didn't mention in the summary? If not, thanks a lot for your discussion and for being very active. I really hope you enjoyed the Fishbowl, and we'll see each other in 2 hours. Where? Downstairs. Yes. Okay. If you want to go together to the venue, to the place where the venue will be, then we can meet together some 15 minutes before. So 15 minutes, 7:45. Yeah, we'll see you downstairs, and you have a chance to go with us to the reception. If you think you can find your own way, then I'll see you there. And thanks again for your discussion.